Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It saves my intro. It's great. I'm really, really grateful to be here as a moderator, both on a topic that I care deeply about, but I'm also excited to learn more about. And I want to make sure that our time is allotted for panelists. So I'll just let you know a little bit about how we're going to do this today so that you understand the protocol I've already given to the incredible people on our panel. I'm going to first allow them to introduce themselves and their organization, and then I have some questions based on what I've learned from them about their services and their organizations and what they hope for you to learn. But there's really one goal today for myself, which is a simple one, and it's inspired from attending the Women's March. Just curious, how many people here did march this past January? It's fantastic. I think that's almost everyone. I ended that march feeling both wet, but also really wanting an activity, really wanting an action item. So something my organization did is we hosted a women's action panel. And we asked women from different nonprofits to come and speak to what the community can do to actually make a difference. And so that's a goal that I have set off for today as well, is to leave with one thing that I can do for each one of these organizations. So that's really a big priority we're going to focus on today. I have asked everyone to keep their responses to 2 minutes. So when I end up having to maybe ask someone to stop talking, you know that I've given them the advance warning. They know. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Okay, great. That's probably a first question, isn't it? So we're going to go ahead and get started with some questions. But the first thing we're going to do is I would just like to go down the line and have each of you share your name, your organization, and share a little bit about what motivated you or inspired you to be a part of this work. Great. Karyn is going to join first. Karyn?
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and having me be a part of the panel tonight. My name is Karyn Skultety. I am the executive director of Openhouse. And Openhouse is an organization that serves older LGBT people in San Francisco with houses, services, and community building, which was not the question you asked me, but I will now answer that one, which is what inspired me to get involved in this work. And the question is what's the work? But when I think about what we're talking about tonight, and when I think about what Openhouse is trying to do, I think I'm a person who, for whatever reason, let's give my family probably a little bit of credit, don't tell my mom, but I think I'm just a person who believes in the power of wisdom. And early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work with people older than me and watch challenges that had come their way and thought about all the different ways you could respond to those challenges. And I thought, what an amazing piece of work it would be to work alongside those people and learn from their wisdom. What if I got to do that every single day? And I do. And that's a pretty lucky and amazing thing to do in the world. And I would just like to try and figure out how to get the rest of the world to start to see that power and that wisdom and use it to make a difference. So I'm a proud member of the LGBT community, and I'm honored that I get to work with just incredible, badass people older than me who teach me things every day.
Hi, can you hear me okay? My name is Alicia Contreras, and I am working as the executive director of the Spanish-Speaking Citizens Foundation. This is a 52-year-old organization in the Fruitvale area. What motivated me? I needed a break from disability. I have been an advocate for so many years that I felt that I hit the place where I couldn't go any more further up in the disability field. So that is a terrible truth. And when I thought about myself, I was like, well, the dream of disability, of the disability movement, is that we can work in other places that are not exactly disabilities. So I expanded my horizons, and I said, okay, I'm a woman, I am an immigrant, I am from Mexico, I belong also to the LGBT group. I have so many other things that define me, so why not trying other things? And in the past, I was also the interim director of an organization working with the Latino community. And I love that work too. So I was hired as the director, And this has been an amazing opportunity, not only to work with the immigrant community, but to learn how what we keep saying, that all the different movements are intertwined, comes back and again and again and again. Of course, when I arrived there and I didn't see any wheelchairs, I was like, nope, this is not disability. But then, of course, as we all know, there are so many disabilities that we cannot see. And we have two main programs. One is citizenship and one is youth. And the citizenship program, actually, we're helping people to either maintain their legal status, renewing their green cards, or becoming citizens. I became a citizen actually in August. And thank you. Yeah, come on, that's a big one. It took me 17 years, people. I mean, the DOMA didn't allow me to become a citizen 10 years ago or even farther. So I have some peers here who know the battle because, you know me for many years. But anyways, the irony is that serving the immigrants, becoming citizens, I see so many who come and say, I cannot remember anything. I have dyslexia, I have this, I have that. So here we go, disability shows up there. And then people who are elders and are also disabled. And how do we help them to have the exemption of the exam because they are disabled? And then the youth. You look at my group of youth and you think, like, these are happy kids. These are just normal, no problems. Well, it hit me recently. Come on, people. These are kids with post-traumatic stress. They all have lost someone in front of them, have been crossed the border with so many different stories and experiences, and it's shocking. I mean, it's shocking that these kids can still participate in the program and concentrate in getting good grades. So again and again, we cannot escape from disability. The news is disabilities everywhere. It doesn't matter if you work for the women's groups, for the immigrants groups, for the Jewish group, for whatever group you work, guess what? There are tons of people with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you for allowing us to celebrate with you as well. Thank you. Great.
So, good evening. I'm Susan Henderson. I'm with Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and we're over in Berkeley, Berkeley, right across the bay. What brought me to the work, it's kind of like I have to, always, I'm a little hesitant always to tell the truth, but it was accidental. I was working for private law firms and law firm administration and doing my MBA, finishing my MBA. And when I finished, as I was finishing, I thought, I'm not a lawyer in law firms, private law firms. If you're not a lawyer, you're working to make lawyers earn more money. And I worked for great law firms. I loved them. But I knew that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. And the first day I went to look for a job, there was an ad for Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. And one of the best parts about it was 6 blocks from my house. And I was commuting to San Mateo, so you can see the attraction. But that said, the day I walked in for the first interview, I knew I had met my people. I knew I was in the place I wanted to be. That was in 1997, so I've been there 20 years. I'm a woman with a disability. I didn't even think about disclosing when I went there. Working as an administrator, I had watched the Americans with Disabilities Act come into play, and I was shocked this is before I was even thinking about disability, that most of the materials I would get in the mail, because we didn't have the internet then, were about, in the employment, the Title I, the employment provisions, was how to sort of get around them as an employer. And that was just shocking to me. So when I walked in there and I talked to the people at DREDF who had worked to pass the ADA, were some of the leaders of the ADA, that was, it was really interesting me to know that here were the people that fought for the ADA, wrote parts of the ADA, had lobbied to get it passed, and that's what brought me to the work. And it's incredible to do disability civil rights. So I've loved every minute of it, except for when we're kind of broke, then it's stressful. But
Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Jessica Lehman. I'm the Executive Director of Senior and Disability Action. And we're here in San Francisco. We bring together seniors and people with disabilities around housing, healthcare, home care, pedestrian safety, name an issue, and we're maybe working on it. So what inspired me to this work? A couple things. So I'm a community organizer at heart by training. I started with ACORN, which some people may know, a longtime direct action grassroots organization, which is sadly no more, at least not by that name. And it was really about people fighting for their own communities and standing up and saying, no one else is going to fight for us in the way that we can ourselves. And really working with poor communities and communities of color and seeing how that worked. And there was a point where I said, why isn't this happening in the disability community? Which is not to say that none of it was, right? Because certainly there was a lot of amazing history. Much of it I didn't know at the time. But I think I felt then and still feel that we need a lot more in disability communities of community organizing and getting out there and fighting for our lives. So I started doing disability organizing. I think also, so I identify as a queer, Jewish, disabled woman. And so intersectionality always was something that made sense, right? And so I think I started to see working in a disability organization and then where there was conflict with domestic worker rights. And I felt like this doesn't make sense. These are two marginalized communities. We need to be working together. And so after a long trajectory, that led me to Senior and Disability Action, where it was like, oh, this is home, right? We have seniors and people with disabilities who don't always understand each other and don't always get along. But to say, here are two communities that share a lot and should be working together, and let's figure out how to make that happen, with also a focus on seniors and disabled people who are also poor people and people of color, LGBT people, all of those marginalized groups who need to fight the most.
Is this on? You can hear me? Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Suzanne. I'm waving to my friend, Suzanne, in the audience. My name is Yomi Wrong, and I'm kind of an outlier of the group. I am not an executive director. I am a...
That's why she looks calm.
I am a former executive director of the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley. So I've done sort of work directly in disability rights, activism and advocacy and direct services and organizing. I now work in healthcare compliance. So I am not working directly in disability rights, although in a lot of ways I am, because I do ADA compliance for a large healthcare organization called Sutter Health. And a lot of my work focuses on, it's compliance and making sure that people have access to quality healthcare. But for me, there's a higher aspiration, and it's really about reducing disparities, health disparities for people with disabilities, whether they identify as disabled or not, or just have functional limitations. So that is what I'm doing now. And what brought me to that work really was my work in disability rights. What brought me to that work was, obviously I've been disabled my whole life, and I benefited from, the ADA was passed the year that I graduated from high school. And it took me a while to really understand, one, what having rights meant to me, how to apply it to my life, how to talk to people about that, how to identify sort of openly and proudly as a person with a disability. So I've done a lot of work through college and in my early career as a journalist, really in the women's movement and in the women's community. And then I spent many years writing for newspapers, and when I left the newsroom, I went to work for CIL, and that was my first time actually working directly in disability rights. And so I felt like it was a really good transition from my work as a journalist, which I really consider public service. I really took seriously this this charge to really help shape the community I serve through providing information and putting the world into context. And then my work at CIL was really about advocating for people with disabilities to have full societal inclusion, to sort of be included at every level of society, and to have a piece of the economy, and to have political agency, and to have a voice. And so I'm no longer running a disability rights organization, but I continue to support organizations that have a really righteous mission. I serve on the board of the ACLU of Northern California, and also an organization that Susan and I both serve on, the advisory board called W.O.R.L.D, and that's Women Organized to Respond to Life-Threatening Disease, and we serve and advocate for women living with HIV and AIDS.
Thank you so much. This is an incredible group up here. Even hearing more of their introduction is very inspiring to me. I've been fortunate that I got to sit in a break room with these women, and something that was really unique observing was happening was the conversation of me letting them know what type of questions I'd be asking, and then them finding ways to support and highlight one another, saying, are you going to talk about housing? Okay, you get that, and I'll cover this one. And it's just really neat to see that kind of celebration and support. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to get some answers to these questions. I also do want to thank all of you. It is Monday night and it is rainy and you are here right now. So thank you for being here. That is fantastic. That alone shows that you care. So I know we're going to walk away with some great support. Wonderful. So my first question is for Karyn. And Karyn, you have worked with both the Institute on Aging, which is an incredible organization not too far from here actually, and also Openhouse, both which serve seniors in San Francisco. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit toward the experience of ageism that your organizations have received, and how do you both work to reduce that stigma as an individual as well as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, from an intersectional approach, there is no ism that gets to win the day. But I will just say this. I think ageism and ableism are so alive and well and thriving in this city, as is racism and homophobia. And but I think that, and many other isms, I won't go through every single terrible one. I want to stop and say, women executive directors are up here, and that is amazing because sexism's still alive and well in leadership positions in nonprofit. But ageism and ableism are different in that they have this invisible, sort of insipid way of getting handed down and accepted as people go along. So, you know, you look at foundational giving in the United States of America, 2% of that giving goes to organizations serving older people or have aging causes. So you say, well, why is that? And the reality is because we're not good at investing in people at the end of their life. We're better at investing in people in the beginning of their life. And look, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and, you know, I can argue that side as well, but the question is why, right? Like, what's happening that we're not willing to think about the fact that we all hopefully will age, and probably the part of ageism comes from that fact, and people not wanting to think about it and not wanting to talk about it, and not wanting to think about, like, what if that was really a valuable thing that we looked forward to and we put at the highest height instead of something that we were taught to avoid and not talk about. And it happens all the time. It happens in jokes you make to your friends about them getting older. It happens in the ways that people whose voices are listened to when they're younger stop getting listened to when they're older. And it's alive and well. So, you know, we have activists, LGBT activists that are working with us who really paved the way in the LGBT rights movement. They led the way. And many of them, when we talked to them, described their experience. One guy said, we used to walk down and feel like we owned these streets, and now we walk down them and no one sees us. We had a group of volunteers in recently from Google X, lovely kids, really great. Like they were so great. And we went around the room before and we said, how many of you know an LGBT person over the age, or how many people do you know over the age of 50 who are LGBT? And they went around the room. We had about 10 volunteers. And do you want to guess the answer? It's between 0 and 0. That's right, 0. So, that's profound, right? What's happening? So I know my 2 minutes are up, but we're not talking about enough. We have to think about, we're not just providing services for older people. We have to think about, are we building a community where we're including and celebrating people at every age and at different ability levels? And that's about everybody changing, not just the people that we're working with. Okay, that's past 2 minutes. You have to hit me with the microphone when I get.
Would you like to add
jump
something?
in unless someone else wants to?
No, that would be wonderful.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to add on. I think it's really important that ageism and ableism are invisible in a lot of ways, as Karyn pointed out, and just take very different forms from kind of what we're used to looking for. And even, ageism and ableism can look so very different, right? We see ableism in police violence and abuse and harassment of people with disabilities that gets unnoticed or justified. And that's, particularly disabled people of color. And then you have disabled people and older people, particularly those who are white, where it looks almost opposite, where it becomes this kind of, oh, let me be extra sweet to you and kind, and I need to take care of you, right? Which seems nice on the surface, and people may have good intentions, but has the same effect of telling someone that they're not really a person anymore, that, they need to be taken care of, that we need to tell them what to do, that they have a certain place over here, that they're not an active contributing member of society anymore. And so I think for us to recognize and talk about all of those forms is crucial.
Thank you very much. And you can hold on to your mic turned on, because my next question is for you. Thank you for sharing that. I would love for you to share a little bit more, specifically in San Francisco, about what is the greatest limitation faced by your organization specifically? And maybe you could remind everyone what the name of your organization is before you share that.
Thank you. Senior and Disability Action faces a lot of issues. I think one of the biggest is the huge housing crisis, right? Which everyone here knows hits everyone. We see it particularly with seniors and people with disabilities who are often a major target of real estate speculators, where someone may have been in a rent-controlled apartment for 50 years, right? And be paying the rent consistently, be a great tenant, but that means their rent is relatively low compared to the 20-something person that they want to bring in to pay 3 times as much. And so there's a lot of forms of eviction and displacement and harassment that we're seeing. And it's terrifying. There are stories of, last year it was literally somebody who was 100 years old who got evicted from her apartment and ended up dying, which is not surprising. People are calling it elder abuse, and it makes sense. One of the other, and I guess I should not just leave it there, but there is a lot we can do about this. And again, part of it is talking about it, right? To really draw some lines in the sand that this is not okay, right? That evicting someone who's 90 or 100 or, evicting anyone, right, is not okay, but using some of these cases to say, wait a minute, do we have any morality here, right? That when people have nowhere to go, when it affects people's health the way it does, this has to stop. And that it can stop, right? We can have better policies in San Francisco and the state of California to make sure that it's not legal to push people out in the way that is happening. We can repeal Costa-Hawkins on the statewide level so that we can have vacancy control in addition to rent control, so you can't just kick someone out and hike up the rent. There is a lot to be done that we all need to make happen. And along with that, I think another major issue is home care or attendant support, which is particularly an issue for women on a couple sides. There are a disproportionate number of disabled women and older women who need some kind of support to be able to live at home and stay active in the community, stay out of hospitals and nursing homes. And I think we all know that it's a very disproportionate number of women, particularly immigrant women of color, who are providing that support. And I mentioned earlier that there's been some conflict there about, well, how do we make sure that disabled people and seniors get the support they need, and that the women who are doing the work, and some men, have decent wages and working conditions. And if we have the scarcity model, it's got to be one or the other. And a lot of us are saying, wait a minute, we have a better vision that we can really believe in, that we can do it all, right? We can have a system where we value disabled people, where we value seniors, where we value women, we value immigrants, to say the money is there, right? We know it's there, that home care can be affordable, and that people can be paid decently and treated well to do it.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. Shameless plug for not myself, but Matthew Desmond, who wrote the book Evicted and won a Pulitzer Prize, will be in San Francisco speaking next week. I really recommend it. It covers a lot of these issues as well. I believe the Commonwealth Club, but Google it before you arrive anywhere, because I could be wrong and we all might end up at the Commonwealth. So thank you so much. And it actually does lead me to another question that I'd like to direct to both Yomi and Alicia. I'd like you both to answer this if you could. So I'll allow Yomi first and then maybe Alicia. Hiring discrimination is a really significant factor, both for people who are HIV positive, people who are disabled, immigrant communities, a lot of communities facing this discrimination. And I think we have a lot of people that are in hiring potential and work for companies and organizations that are able to really rectify this. How can we as a community better ensure that applicants are provided with equal opportunities and equal employment opportunities? And how can we ensure that applicants applying know that our organizations offer that? So maybe Yomi, if you could answer first, and then I'll allow Alicia to answer as well in your communities.
Okay, actually, I'd like Alicia to answer first, and then I would like to piggyback
Maybe
on
we
that.
could do like a Jeopardy.
Well, what I'm going to say is that if you know the answer, please share it, because I have no
Well,
idea.
I think there's nuance there when you're talking about people with HIV and AIDS, and there is there's a lot of stigma associated with this chronic illness of living with HIV, and so I think it's a broader answer than what would be allotted in 2 minutes, but really talking about creating safe spaces so that women with HIV, can come out of the shadows and talk about their lived experience and lead and be agents for social change. And, I am not a woman with HIV, I'm an ally, and I work, on behalf of an organization that supports them. But, women with HIV are, Black women and Latino women are much more likely to have HIV, to contract it, to be facing stigma and racism and oppression and discrimination in employment and in a whole lot of other sectors of society. So it's sort of it's a slightly different answer for sort of the global issue of unemployment and underemployment among people with disabilities. I think it might be the same for immigrant communities, but I'll let Alicia speak to that. But I mean, I think, in terms of employers, just having fair work practices, treating people decently, not violating people's rights, understanding that people with disabilities, whether those are obvious or non-apparent, have something to offer your organization, and being being good employers, being places that people want to come to work, where people can get reasonable accommodations to be able to go to work. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but
Absolutely.
I'm interested to hear what Alicia said.
And before we pass it along, you used the word ally, and I really appreciate that you used that word. Could you just speak a little bit toward how all of us could become allies for, in particular, women who are HIV positive?
I think the first step is to become educated. There's a lot of ignorance and miseducation around HIV infection, how the disease is transmitted, what a person with HIV looks like. And, you know, we sort of have these morality issues around that, like, are people deserving of that? You know, did they do something to put themselves in that position? And the truth is that these are people and women living with chronic disease. You know, people are able to live full lives with supports, with access to health care, with access to sexual and reproductive health care, with access to supports. So, yeah.
So we'll return the question, and Alicia, if you could speak a little bit toward how companies, employers, and team members who may work in HR and hiring capacities could better support the immigrant community.
You know, I am not sure about the answer about when hiring, but I'm going to tell you that what I am trying to figure out is with our youth program. At schools, the way they see you defines the opportunities that are going to be presented to you. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing and I'm fighting against is about the fact that they look at your face, it looks Latina, most likely, I mean, they make already an idea of who you are. And they're not telling my kids, I mean, while the rest of the kids are now learning about scholarships and applying for Cal State and all those things, last week one of the students came, you know, I just learned that the whole class there has heard nothing about the deadline this November 30 to apply for the California University. And I'm saying this because this is going to have an impact for the rest of their lives about what jobs they will be able to access. So it's not that they didn't have the capacity. So what I have been doing is working with the kids. Many of them are permanent residents already. Many are citizens. And I am telling them straightforward and saying, look, you go to that office, and the first thing that you're going to say is, just pretend you're blind. I am a US citizen. What is there for me? And I hate to do this because it's kind of like making a different class of immigrants. But I'm trying to find solutions, and the first one that, you know, at least those that I know are citizens that totally would qualify for the financial aid and for different things, I'm fighting for them. It will have an impact on what jobs.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you for doing that fight. My next question, I'd like to transition a little bit to Susan. So Susan, maybe you could start by just explaining what exactly this is. But you lead the Media Alliance Project, which really addresses misinformed coverage and raises awareness on disability discrimination. And something that really came to mind when I read about it was how heavily ingrained we are in social media and how we are doing a lot of sharing potentially of something that's a piece of misinformation without even realizing it. So I'm hoping that you can explain a little bit about what that project is to start. And then if you have any advice for us as social media sharers, which I assume I'm not the only one in here who is, and how we can make sure that we're also a part of that effort.
Sure, thanks. So we started our Media Alliance project back in around 2006, and then 2008 hit, and the economy went down, and funders were like, we're going to pay for food on the table and roofs over heads. So our project sort of took a slump. But just as the economy's gotten better, we've been able to hire a director of communications and reinvigorate the project because it's really, really needed. The media just reflects to journalists and people who work in the media, which is now everywhere because we can all do media in a sense. Have the same biases, hold the same stereotypes as the general public. And those stereotypes about people with disability have been misinformed for hundreds of years. So the project was started to start addressing that misinformation and to start raising awareness so that, disability is everywhere. So there's a saying in the disability community that goes, nothing about us without us. And recently we've been looking at that saying and just nothing without us. Because you can see, we've talked about elders and housing and immigration and HIV status and work, employment, every single one of those areas, disability is an issue. I want to start a parlor game where people in the audience can yell out something and we'll sit here and say, okay, here's the disability connection. So that was the reason, because we wanted to start raising, to clear up those stereotypes, to stop, the inspiration porn. I don't know, are people familiar with that phrase, inspiration porn?
With the word porn?
So inspiration, we wanted to diminish inspiration porn. We want the news to talk about people with disabilities as people, instead of objects of charity or pity or people who are sick, people who are frail. We want people to know that there are people with disabilities working everywhere, that disability is a policy issue in every area. So that was really the why we started, and now we have a director of communications, Lawrence Carter-Long, who's good at what he does. And so we have somebody now who we can dedicate to the project and work on it. And as far as social media goes, when you see that inspiration porn, when you see the little girl on her blades running a lap, don't share it. I know there's awareness campaigns that are very, it's good to raise awareness about issues, but you really have to look at it and think, am I doing that because I feel pity? Am I doing it because that's so inspiring that Jessica, a wheelchair user, is an ED? You just have to stop and think, what's playing on what is it that's playing on my instincts and to press that, share. Instead, share the issues about why we can't let the Affordable Care Act be repealed, why Medicaid expansion is so important to people with disabilities. That's the social media message that you want to share.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. In homelessness, we refer to it as poverty porn. So very similarly, Project Homeless Connect has a really large challenge in that we really believe in dignity, and as such, we don't allow photographs at our events or at our community services. And we have had funders tell us specifically they will not fund an event if they can't come and take photos of the services they're providing. And then they advise us, thank you so much for the advice, we say to them, that we could receive more donations and support if we would share photos. There's an understanding in nonprofit that if you can put a baby or a puppy on your brochure, you're golden. But those of us who are not babies and puppies have a greater challenge, which is engaging stories and helping people understand the needs without putting people on display. So I'm really grateful that you brought that up as well. And next time when you do volunteer somewhere and they ask you not to take photos, ask yourself, why did you feel that you needed that? And maybe comply would be really great. So thank you. Did anyone else want to respond to social media in general? Or we can move on to the next question. Yes, Alicia.
I just want to add something that it's interesting because I haven't realized the connection, but it's definitely connected, which is that, as you all know, there's so much about ICE grabbing people, taking them to, and everybody is stressed. And being an immigrant who for 17 years had to figure out how I could stay with my family, being in that stress, led me to actually back off and say, wait, what do we want with our organization? We don't want a space where stress is at the top of the roof. I mean, we have like 13,000 people walking in every year in our building. And what's the percentage of chances that some of these people are going to be kicked out of the country? And what I realized was that what was more useful as an immigrant was actually the opposite. Please don't stress me out more. I need actually a space where I can feel that I still have a life here and I can study, and that's what I have been doing with the organization. The price I'm paying is that funds are not flowing the same way as they are with those organizations that are working in the emergency mode. And I don't regret it. I mean, of course, I'm stressed out, like Susan. How am I going to pay the next month of everything, right? But I love to see, like 3 days ago, one of the kids came to my office and he said, Alicia, what do we have to do for you to take us to the Golden Gate because we want to take pictures of the Golden Gate? And I'm like, how many of you can go tomorrow? And they're like, really? So, I'm a crazy person in the organization, but you should see the faces. And I love that feeling of, I'm giving them the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 hours of fun. And that's priceless.
Absolutely. It is priceless, but donations do help. Just keep
Please
that in
do.
mind.
Yes.
Going back to that. Can I add one more thing? Sorry
Of
to break the
course,
rule.
yes, Karyn, thank you.
That just adds on to that, which is that I think there's also right now just a really difficult place for those of us who are doing direct service work. And there's a lot of pressure, and social media has contributed to this, which is like, this crazy thing happened today in the form of a tweet or something else. And what's your organizational response? And so like Openhouse writes a statement and Senior and Disability Action writes a statement. And I'm like, we're all writing statements while we're not able to do the things that we're doing. And at the same time, every one of us on this panel is part of the resistance. Like, well, sorry, I'm assuming I'm just taking a leap of faith on this. But so I think that's the other thing, is thinking about what that looks like, how it looks, and are you sitting in your office writing statements, or are you working with the people that you're lucky enough to represent and advocate with, and giving them a chance to lead the resistance or to be a part of it in the way that they want. But that you can't do that I can't do that with folks in 24 minutes, and so I just want to say, as you look at different organizations, and if you feel like, gosh, like they don't, that open house, they haven't put out 17 statements, like, I don't know that that's making a difference right now in the way that some of the direct action and the work that the folks I'm sitting beside and that I'm doing. And so I think just let's think about that together. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's really important and really helpful for all of these organizations, which are really local community organizations. And as such, it's often very important to stop asking the question of what your overhead cost is, and rather ask, what is the impact of this contribution, and however it may be used, because I think that really goes hand in hand with, like you mentioned, when we're spending our time directly with the people that we serve, that's where our priority is, that's where our focus is. So understanding that as a community as well. Excellent, thank you. I'd like to ask this question to both Jessica and Karyn, and I'm really glad that I planned this question in advance, especially after seeing Jessica arrive today and then say to Karyn, oh my goodness, you're here. We keep emailing, we keep connecting. You attended my event, we didn't talk. So it's clear that these organizations that serve much of the same community and all of our neighbors in San Francisco collaborate and work together. And so I'd love for you each to just answer, how is it that your organization collaborates with other nonprofits in the community, not necessarily one another's, but how do you collaborate with other nonprofits to achieve your goals? Maybe you could answer first.
Thanks. So yeah, I was joking that I've been avoiding Karyn and now I can't avoid her anymore. No, Senior Disability
It was an awkward
Action.
green room. It was an awkward green room situation. No.
SDA works with Open House all the time. We hadn't had a chance to meet, amazingly. We're very glad we did. And I think I've collaborated with most, if not all, of the people either in your current roles or in past roles. I talked first about intersectionality, right? And so at SDA, it's funny, recently a funder said, who do you work with? And I said, well, name an issue and I'll list the organizations, right? Everything we do in coalition, and part of it is a recognition that we can't do this alone, right? There's too much work and it's too hard, especially with a lot of the major policy change that we're working on. It's huge, it takes a lot of work. And recognizing that we bring a piece of the puzzle, right? We have seniors and people with disabilities who are also part of other marginalized communities, but we need to be working with immigrant organizations. We need to be working with independent living centers. We need to work with senior organizations. We, as a San Francisco city-based organization, need to work with statewide and national groups. And so as far as how we do that, it's all kinds of coalitions. It's reaching out. It's interesting. Karyn was talking about statements, and I kind of whispered jokingly to Susan that, or SDA borrows Dreta's statement, and we ask if we can print that in our newsletter, which we've actually done, right? Because that's one of those things that it's like, yes, we want to put out something about, we do stand with immigrants who are being attacked today, or Muslims who are being attacked tomorrow. And how do we do that, right? And so it's also really about learning from other organizations who know better and saying, we want to support you. What are the things we can do? Or what can we put in our newsletter to say, call this number and take this action, when we're not the best ones to know, but we can partner with those who do.
Thank you very much. Karyn, same question.
I mean, I think that was Jessica's long answer to say she doesn't want to partner with me. That's what I heard from that. It was smoothly done, though, really. Yeah, I mean, I think that I can tell you the thing that gets in the way of partnership is the thing we keep bringing up, which is that organizations end up, we're all going after funding, and people forget. It just gets hard because everyone's trying to survive and stay open, and so we somehow end up feeling like competitors, even though we're fierce advocates for each other at the same time. And I think sometimes we struggle to get over that hurdle that gets in the way. So I think there are some funders who are starting to really see the value in partnership, and I think we all have to get our own organizational egos out of the way sometimes to say, like, look, it's not like any of us are sitting around like, gosh, I just wish there was like some things to do, I wish there was some work. Like, there's so much to be done right now. And can we really say together, like, there's so much to be done that I'm willing to do less of that so I can do more of this, and we can reach more people because of that. So I think that that's part of it. And I think that, again, like, I think leaders have to support each other in the work that they're doing. I think we have to admit the things that we don't know and we're not expert in, and that it's okay to have somebody else who's doing that expertise and to follow their lead and say, I'm so glad you have this expertise and I'm following your lead. But yeah, I think there's more work to be done around it. I think that's true in the LGBT community. I went from being in aging services, watching those organizations try and partner and work together, to now looking at LGBT organizations and they try and work together. And I think everyone's intent is in the right place. And if we can get support that it makes sense to partner and to come together and show the impact of that, I think we end up stronger together. And it's easier said than done. So I'm just going to keep asking Jessica to have coffee with me until she agrees. That's the commitment I'm making.
Thank you so much. I would love to ask Yomi a question now, transitioning a little bit. So while you work with Sutter Health today, you were executive director of an organization that really was involved in advocacy for policy changes, both at the local and the national level, which is really incredible. You still, I believe, to this day, advise stakeholders on policy changes. And I'd love to give you a chance to just kind of brag for a moment, which is always fun, but maybe you could share, it's a two-part question. What one policy are you most proud of having participated on or worked within? And then also, if you have any advice for anyone in this room that I think really likely would like to engage in policy, because you're here and you all raised your hand of having attended the march, and what can they do in a single day that could make a difference, if anything?
Well, because I'm not directly involved, I think that, of everybody on the panel, I think that DREDF is an organization that has a lot of impact in terms of being able to draft policy and inform policy, and I think it's an organization that's worthy of people learning more about and getting involved. So I'm going to kick that one to Susan, because I really think it's an organization that is really taking the lead on a lot of the disability rights policy that we're seeing, and they have national reach. When I was at CIL, one of the things that I was most interested in and excited about was healthcare reform. And there was, so much promise, right? We all had so many hopes about the Affordable Care Act and about healthcare reform. And one thing that I really enjoyed doing and I miss that work was really partnering with HMOs and insurance companies and folks at the state level, at the Department of Healthcare Services, to really look at long-term services and supports, and how those can be more effective, and how we can leverage that so that people with disabilities and seniors can get the supports that they need to live in community and not be isolated in institutions. And so we were really looking at some demonstration projects on what it would look like to have, like there were certain counties that were going to be involved in these sort of long-term care projects where we're just throwing a lot of money at keeping people in community. And I think that that's really important. And I know that some of that work is still happening, but the Affordable Care Act is it's in peril, and we don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of what we thought was going to happen with Medicare expansion, some of this stuff is just either on hold or it's just gone away. So, I'm ever hopeful that we'll get back to that. But that was, when I was at CIL, some of the most rewarding work that we were doing was really about, envisioning what a reformed health system could look like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Susan, kicked over to you.
Oh, that same question?
About
Yes?
policy.
Or about policy.
Yeah.
So we've worked on a lot of policy, and I've been there 20 years, so it's really hard to say. I think that in the last 10 years, a lot of our policy work has been focused on healthcare, and it really, even longer than that. And part of it started back, I don't know if everybody remembers, when Sheila Kuehl was in the state legislature and she was working for single-payer healthcare. And we saw it as an opportunity, just like the disability community saw the Affordable Care Act as an opportunity to expand, to help end disparities. But because, I don't know about you, but I really feel like if we didn't have to worry about health care and paying for it, so much stress would so many of our social issues would go away. I really do believe that. So when Sheila Kuehl introduced single-payer health care in California, we started inserting, these guys were there, we were all doing this. That was a time when we got to know each other, I think. We were inserting ourselves. We were, people with disabilities, just like everybody else, uses healthcare, and surprise, and we were inserting ourselves into the tables where people were talking about what should it look like, how will it happen. And I remember one day, one of our attorneys came back from a meeting here in San Francisco with women's groups who were talking about what are we going to make sure happens in single-payer healthcare. And one of the other women turned to our attorney after she had said something about disparities, lack of access to healthcare for women with disabilities, costs. She turned and she said, that was really helpful. I've been wondering why you've been coming to these meetings. I thought women with disabilities were all on Medi-Cal. And so it was like, and it was like, oh, well, I have a job and I have to pay for my free, so it was just really eye-opening. And so now getting to the level, so we have been working on the issue now for over a decade, and working at the federal level, we inserted ourselves, we wrote comments on pending regulations. We got, we worked with the other civil rights groups on making sure the non-discrimination pieces were in the Affordable Care Act, that they were, essential health benefits were defined in a way that were meaningful and useful to people with disabilities. So that's been really, really incredible. And then to have it under attack this summer was sickening. I mean, and talk about coalitions, the disability community came out, and we just honored National Adapt. I don't know if you've heard about them. Hopefully you saw them on TV in the media over the summer, because they did the direct action, put their bodies on the line for all Americans, because losing Medicaid as we know it and the access to health care that the Affordable Care Act has brought would be devastating to everybody. So, I'm really proud to have worked and made sure that DREDF has been able to do that work.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we are about out of time for the question portion, but I did have one other thing I'd love for you to share with the group, which is, could you just tell everyone, because we're all in the Bay Area and this is a place we could visit, what makes the Ed Roberts campus so special?
Well, it's special because we're there, but no. No, the Ed Roberts campus is a universally designed building at the Ashby BART station, and what that means is that it was built to be usable by a wide variety of people, ages and sizes and abilities, without having any special accommodations and things. So there's a ramp that goes to the second floor, so people are not dependent on an elevator if the power goes out or there's an emergency. It's and it's not, so it was built with these principles, but it's also aesthetically very beautiful. And it's at a transit hub, and we're a transit-dependent population. So you should really come by and just check out the building. It's won many, many awards. The architects were Letty Madam Stacy architects here in San Francisco. And the other great thing about building a building, and this was 7 small nonprofits, whose budgets were up $2 million or less, basically, raised $52 million over a period of 15 years to get this thing built. A lot of that was because of the connection to BART.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
You should see it.
So, and there's meeting spaces. You can have your meetings and small conferences there, fundraising events.
We've had,
and it's very reasonable.
I don't work at the ERC anymore, but I used to. I worked on the first floor at CIL, and I just want to say something about all of our nonprofits, the 7 nonprofits that came together to build the Ed Roberts campus, we were all spread out around Berkeley and Oakland and whatever. And for CIL, we were on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley in this really kind of falling apart, held together with bubble gum and this funky space. Historical, right? But really funky. And the difference that I saw in my staff and our consumers when we moved to the ERC and I'm going to tear up, to have, all of our organizations, the organizations at our at ERC are run by and for people with disabilities, and they're nonprofits, and to have first of all, our employees to be able to go to a suitably professional office environment, a beautifully universally designed space, and for our consumers and the public to be able to access this space and see the value in it. There've been weddings at the ERC, there have been memorials, there have been, and everything in between. It's really a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful community space, and it's really a gift to the Bay Area from the disability community. And so I think everybody should go see it.
Right. It's a landmark to social justice. It
Absolutely.
really is. When it was built, I realized our architect had talked in his, told us about architecture and design as a social justice issue, and I thought I knew that because we're always talking about barriers in the disability community. But once it was built, it was like an epiphany. It would totally made sense. And now I just walk around in buildings and think about, I see the barriers everywhere. And when I see a building that's really accessible, congratulations, JCC. It makes you realize what a difference it makes in people's lives.
Thank you so much. So that's the Ed Roberts campus in Berkeley, if anyone missed that, to be able to visit. I do have one final question that I'm going to allow everyone to go down the line and answer. But one thing I just want to celebrate came up a little bit earlier, which was mentioned by Karyn about how we have all women up here right now. And that's really incredible because over 85% of employees in nonprofit and social services are women, but less than 5% are executive directors or CEOs of organizations over $2 million. So I think that we often miss where the gender disparity is in a nonprofit industry because it is so dominated by females entirely. However, these are really incredible leaders, and I'm proud to be sitting amongst you all and hear you all. And I'm also really grateful that the leaders of the Women's March made such an effort to find female leaders to speak on this panel. So thank you for doing that as well. So my final question before we open it up to some Q&A is maybe we could start at the other end and come down this way. But I'd love for you to just share, outside of monetary donations, which I'm going to go ahead and say on behalf of everyone, I really encourage you to make. It is what sustains us. As nonprofits, we don't have a product to sell. We only have a mission. And so as such, we really rely on the support of the community to help us continue achieving that mission. That being said, there are many other ways to get involved and support organizations and social services and activities. So if you could just share one way that you would like to ask the people in this room to give back to either your organization or any platform that you care a lot about. So it does not have to be where you work directly.
So again, I'm going to put in a plug for W.O.R.L.D and our services for women living with HIV. So December 1st is World AIDS Day. And W.O.R.L.D will be hosting like a spa day that people can either contribute to or come and be involved in. There are brochures on the back table, and it's sort of like an easy way where you can get some more information about what W.O.R.L.D does and about some of the issues and a way to support women and maybe get pampered yourself to have a spa day. So that would be one way for people to get involved and support what we do.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't boil it down to one way. I'm going to contradict the question and give more than one way. First, before I forget, we are actually doing a press conference this Thursday about home care affordability. And we're highlighting Support at Home, which is a brand new program in San Francisco that's currently run out of the Institute on Aging. That's a home care voucher program for people that don't quite qualify for in-home supportive services because the income and asset limits are so low, but who have trouble paying privately. So if you can join us, it's 12 o'clock this Thursday at City Hall on the Polk Street side on the steps. And we're going to have cupcakes and sparkling cider to celebrate, and then we'll kind of talk about what's next. There's oh my gosh, there's so many ways to get involved, and I'm talking fast, trying to fit them in. We're always inviting people to join Senior and Disability Action. We have a housing collaborative, a healthcare action team, a transit justice and pedestrian safety group. So if you're interested in any of those issues, you can find out about those monthly meetings. We do a general meeting once a month, the second Thursday of the month at the Unitarian Universalist Church at Franklin and Geary. Of course, all of this is on our website, which is sdaction.org. You can also sign up for our sort of monthly e-newsletter. It's basically whenever I can manage to get it out there. And monthly-ish, yes, exactly. And that'll kind of keep you informed. And of course, it's seniors and people with disabilities, but also a lot of allies there to kind of keep apprised about what's happening in the community. Thanks.
So I would say that as the policy the focus of our organization is mostly policy and law. Go to dredf.org, D as in dog, R-E, D as in dog, F as in Frank.org, and sign up for our digital newsletters and alerts, and follow us on social media. And when you get those alerts, take action, because we don't send them unnecessarily. We send them when we need the collective voice of progressives and people with disabilities and their allies to let members of Congress, because we mostly do federal work, but we do some state work, know that this is not okay, and just like we did with the Affordable Repeal and Replace the Affordable Care Act. And there are other issues. The budget, the proposed budget is going to be a fight. There's things that happen in policy that we can stop before they get very far. We've just saw that there's amendments to the House budget to start making it so there'll be vouchers that go for children to go to private school will be totally tax deductible. But for kids with disabilities, going to private school is tricky, because private schools don't have the same civil rights obligations and disability so they don't have to follow the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So we're very careful about advocacy around vouchers, spending public money or even private money for that. But follow us on social media, subscribe to our alerts. Just that you can go to the Facebook page. It's got a form to go on to get our alerts also.
One thing that I think we all can do is, if you see someone who is an immigrant, just smile, just send a message that you are not hating immigrants. Right now, we have a huge need for that. We have to remind immigrants that this country was founded with immigrants. And that's everywhere where you go. That's very helpful. I think that spreading the word that, hey, we're in the Bay Area and we're friendly and we're all friends is important to remember every minute. Our location is very close to the Fruitvale BART station, and we have youth coming every day, Monday through Friday, depending on the day. They arrive a little earlier, but most of the time they're there from 4 to 7. And some of them need help with geometry, some of them with English, some of them with different homeworks. So I always welcome volunteers who want to help with homework. We also have the citizenship classes Thursdays and Fridays, 5 to 7, and it's totally run by volunteers. To become a citizen, you have to pass a test. You have to memorize 100 questions, and some people don't learn as fast in a group. Some people actually need a one-on-one sitting with someone. So that is something that is helpful sometimes. Also, when the test is arriving, it's more helpful to kind of like have more practice, and hearing different pronunciations help people, because you never know who is the person who is going to test you. Also, if you know people who like to participate in the 5K, we're going to have our fundraiser. It's called the Aztec Run. We had a fabulous event this year, and we're going to have it the same day, May 6th of 2018, around the Lake Merritt. So if you know any runners, or you love to run, or you want to volunteer that day, please let me know. Our website is SSCF, like Spanish Speaking Citizens Foundation.org. And that's where we are.
What should I ask you for? Let's see. So a couple of things. So we were really excited when I got to Openhouse. It happened actually right before I got there. We opened the first LGBT welcoming senior affordable housing in the Bay Area. And we're really excited about that. And we just broke ground on our second building. Between those two buildings, we'll have 119 units that are LGBT welcoming senior affordable housing, yes. And it's easy to look at us because we have a big, beautiful building that we built with Mercy Housing, and we're building a second building, and it's easy to think like, oh, they're sort of done and set. But let's remember that for 40 units in that first building in a 7-day period, we had 1,800 people apply for 40 units. So I have about 50 people who are building an amazing community at 55 Laguna. And my work is about the 1,750 who are heartbroken and not living in safe places, and moving out of the city and going back in the closet. And we are a service organization. And we are a housing organization who provides housing, but we also really have to be thinking and involved in housing advocacy. So it's easy for sometimes people to think that the work is done. And for us, the work we've done so far is really a drop in the bucket compared to what's needed. So we're happy to have you donate. We're happy to have you come volunteer. If you don't know an LGBT person over the age of 50, you need to put that on your list of things to do, and then you need to shut up and listen and hear about the experiences that they've had. And then I'll make one sort of direct ask to my friends here at the Women's March, which is, and this is part of what Jessica and I were talking about before, is, you know, I like to say that the word senior really is about who has the most experience in the room, right? We can think of it as aging, but senior is like a title of, it just means like you're way more experienced than everybody else. And I think when we think about activism, people who are older and a lot of the disability community has absolutely put in more experience into activism than a lot of the rest of us. So let's find a way when we have marches to put them at the front, and the rest of us will be lucky enough to follow in those footsteps. And it'll be complicated, and we'll have to think about how to do it and all those kinds of things. But this is about like, what kind of community do we want to be, right? And I'd like to be a community that where we would think about those things and be really proud when we take those kinds of steps. So there you go, direct ask to them.
As one piece of that, we made a commitment in the green room that there's going to be a senior and disabled contingent leading Pride next year. So if anyone wants to help make that happen or join the contingent, let us know. But it's going to happen.
And we're going to talk to them about the Women's March in January. I heard that they're having too. So,
Excellent.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I would love
Never
to,
getting put
before
on
we
a
do
panel
Q&A,
again.
have just a round of applause for everyone up here. Thank you. So for the Q&A, I'm going to have a little support with the mic, but something to really help with time, because I know we're running low, is if you could make sure you are asking a question is the first thing. Can be really helpful. And if you could have your question for just one panelist rather than with the expectation that everyone would answer, it allows us to have more questions. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Hi, I was going to ask Susan if you could talk a little bit about, I think it's 620 and the Jackie Spears supporting this effect on the ADA. I don't know much about it, so I'd like to learn a little bit about it.
Sure. So HR 620 is a bill in the House. There's an equivalent that's been introduced in the Senate, but it's not really going anywhere. What it is it's notification. It's called the ADA Education and Notification Act, and we don't know why they call it the Education Act, but it's about letting businesses who are not compliant with architectural access in their buildings if you come in, if I as a wheelchair user goes to a building that has an access barrier, right now under the ADA you can file a complaint, you can go to court and have, get a remedy, have attorney's fees paid, and in some states like California you can get damages. HR 620 wants to take away that ability to file a lawsuit to have your civil rights enforced by saying that the person with a disability will need to write a letter to the business owner and say, here's the day I came to your establishment, here are the technical issues that were wrong, that were incorrect, and then that establishment will get up to 6 months or longer to remedy that before any further action can be taken. That's it in a nutshell. As the development director at DREDF has said, it's kind of interesting that they want to put, they're saying that the ADA is so complex that a business owner who has to comply with plenty of other, code issues like fire and, and then has to deal with HR and employment issues, that the ADA is so complex, they can't do it. They can't know what the issues are. They can't afford to make sure they've got a little ramp. But me, a layperson with a disability, wants to go into their business, and I need to know everything that's wrong with this space. So anyway, this is gaining steam in Congress, and unfortunately, I think it's like 62 co-sponsors now. There's 9 California Democrats that are co-sponsoring it, and one of them is Jackie Spear. And we have not been able to get her off of it. And Amy Berra in Sacramento, and then the rest are mostly down in Southern California and around the Central Valley, a couple places in the Central Valley. It's, you know, they are not thinking of this as a civil rights issue, even no matter what we say to them. And it's a business lobby. It's the Chamber of Commerce's, it's the other business associations that are supporting this, and they're big, and they have a lot of money, and they have a lot of lobbyists. So what's really important, and this is the kind of alert we'll send, is if you live in the Bay Area, and Jackie Spear is your congresswoman, she needs to hear from you and say, this is not okay. So you can go to our website. We have a web pages on it. So.
Any other questions?
Well, I did want to ask a question to the whole group, but I won't. So I'll just say, which one of you is planning to run for office, and what office are you going to run for?
You can all answer, actually, if you want to just raise hands.
I've thought about it. I don't like my city council, and I'm like, I can do better than her. I just became a citizen. It could happen in 4 years.
Yeah.
I've thought about it.
Oh, good.
I don't know which office yet, but we've had a relative, it's tremendous how lacking female LGBT politicians have been in this proud city. I'll just leave that right there for a minute. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out if I have enough wisdom to figure out how to do that yet. But I also have two small kids, so. She's going to use my kids. I think I got a campaign. Openhouse board will be thrilled to see this on the live stream. Thanks for everything, but I decided to run for us. I mean, it's tempting. Honestly, it's like.
Karyn for the Board of Supervisors.
Oh, God. Wow. All right, listen, I'm going to get your business card afterwards and we're going to talk. So, at some point, I mean, look, there's been so few things in the last year where we're able to say, wow, that felt hopeful. But boy, Tuesday night was one of them. And if we can get more leaders who start to look and sound like Tuesday night, we're going to start to figure things out in a better and different way. And so, yeah. My wife's going to kill me. Please go on to the next question.
Yeah, this is Jessica, and I wanted to know if then I kind of know the answer, what has been going on in terms of home care advocacy and activism on a state level.
So can I repeat that, Sasha? Yeah. So Sasha says this question is for Jessica, and this question is about home care advocacy, and I kind of know the answer already, but what has been going on a statewide and national level, did you say? Yeah. I feel like that's unfair. You should just remind me what I should be talking about. Well, so it's interesting. One of the big things was what Yomi was talking about with SB 562, single payer healthcare, and trying to include long-term services and supports. And so there's a very big move right now to make that happen. It is sort of in there. And there's a group called the Care Council, the Bay Area Care Council, that's senior and disability groups and domestic worker groups working together. That has created some stronger language and working to get that included in the bill. And then, of course, it's all a matter of pushing it and convincing our legislators that they need to pass it. And what am I forgetting at the national level? Oh, the governors. Thank you. Thank you. Sasha is just telling me what to say here. So we're electing a new governor next year, which is very exciting. And so there's a lot of issues that we need to bring up. And so there's a big move statewide to make sure that senior and disability issues, and particularly home care or long-term services and supports, are part of that debate. So start paying attention, go on Facebook and start asking those questions, right? What is your plan on how to make sure that seniors and disabled people get the support they need at home, right? To be able to stay in the community. Show up at those events, ask those questions. The idea is for them to see that it's actually a benefit to make seniors and disabled people and home care and all sorts of other issues part of their platform, that will actually help them get elected because we're all talking about those issues.
Can I add? While yes, advocating for all of that, one of the things that I also would like to add is assistive technology. Wheelchairs. I just learned actually 2 weeks ago when I did all the requests for the service for my wheelchair that actually Kaiser removed wheelchairs from durable medical equipment.
Well, they were never under durable. Yeah, it depends.
Well,
it depends.
But it was always paid, and suddenly now is like big surprise.
Well, it depends
it
on
is not.
your coverage.
There's
So.
fewer plans that cover
Yeah,
it.
there's fewer plans that cover it.
And what I want to mention is that when we're advocating for elders to stay at home, many times the wheelchair actually could save so much money because, I mean, like you saw me here, I Zoom in 10 minutes, I went to repark my van. If I didn't have my power chair, there is no possible way that I could do that, and most likely I would need someone to push me the distance. So just a reminder of how important actually technology is when we are advocating, because having the right technology, as we all know, could be the difference between how much need we help. I mean, how much help we need.
I think people are always surprised to hear that, like, hearing aids are not covered by most insurance, and it's $5,000 an ear. So, and that motorized wheelchairs are, especially for small business, like we can't get it, ironically, DREDF can't get coverage for people who use motorized chairs on our insurance because we're just too small. And what's really hard about all of this, and we learned during those early healthcare days, was that the insurance companies have all this power and they hold all this actuarial information that we don't get access to, because to some extent they say it's proprietary, that this is how they base their rates. But I have a hard time believing that power chairs collectively cost more than all of the triple heart bypasses that are happening every day in this country, and just saying. So anyway, so those are the kinds of things that impact people, have real impacts on people's lives, as far as healthcare, and need a collective strong voice to speak out for it. So hopefully if the California single payer legislation gains some steam and becomes real again, because really we're the 7th largest economy in the world. If we can't do it, I mean, the other countries have it. We're bigger than them. Those are the kinds of things we need to be advocating for, and we need everybody who's for single payer to advocate for that kind of inclusion.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things that make, if you start to look into this at all, there's just a lot of things that actually make just no sense. Like even if you don't care about other people, like if you just care about finances, it doesn't make sense. I mean, there's a lot of ways that the system was set up for people with disabilities and seniors that were like, mostly the plan is nursing homes. Like that was kind of the early plan. Like, and first of all, it's the last thing there's no one who has ever come to me and said, like, as I think about aging, like what I'm mostly thinking is nursing home. Like but it's also just economically makes no sense. But the system really got set up for that. That was kind of the plan until lots of us said, and lots of people said, like, that is not what people want. And we are not going to allow that to be the solution. And, it's still people who are middle income people in San Francisco. And that's the program that is the support at home program that Jessica was talking about. Like, there's very few options for them to get any help at home. So like, what's the option, right? And it just makes no sense. Like people spending time in emergency rooms and in hospitals and nursing homes is incredibly expensive. And there's these like really pretty straightforward, easy things that we can do, but we don't do them and have this other way of having the system work. It's sort of mind-boggling. So yeah, it doesn't learn a little bit about that. It doesn't take long to see how much it makes sense to support this from an economic perspective, from a human dignity perspective, from a good healthcare perspective. So yeah, let's see what we can get done, for goodness sake.
Question authority.
Resist.
Do we have any more questions? Well, thank you all so much for being here. We have another Women's March panel coming up on January 30th on racial justice, and we hope you're able to join us for that one. And thank you to all our panelists and our moderator, and thank you for coming out.
And tell everybody you came. Tell everybody you came and saw us. It's important.